Welcome to the May edition of Let's Talk Criterion, where we preview the upcoming UK and US Criterion releases. Now this month in the UK we've Round Midnight by Bertrand Tavernier, in the US Mr Klein by Joseph Losey, in the US and UK The Funeral by Yuzo Itami, in the US only Mississippi Masala by Mara Nair, Chan is Missing in the US, and of course in both the US and UK the noir classic Double Indemnity from Billy Wilder. So let's get started, and first up we have a film directed by Joseph Losey. That's the 1976 Mr Klein, or Mr Klein. Now this is another film which examines the collaboration between Criterion and Europe's Studio Canal. They're specialising in classic 4K restorations, and recently we've had Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Cercle Rouge, and now we have Mr Klein with Alain Delon as Robert Klein, a decadent art dealer in Paris during World War II, who makes a tidy profit buying up paintings from his desperate Jewish clients. As Klein searches for a Jewish man with the same name for whom he has been mistaken, he finds himself plunged into a Kafkaesque nightmare in which his identity seems to dissolve and the forces of history close in on him. Met with considerable controversy on its release for its portrayal of the real-life wrongdoings of the Vichy government, this haunting, disturbingly beautiful film shivers with existential dread as it traces society's descent into fascist fear and inhumanity. In Mr Klein, although Losey integrates historical elements, such as the infamous Veldiv roundup, into the film, it is more than a reconstruction of the life and status of the Jews under the Vichy regime. The relationship of the film with the works of the writer Franz Kafka has often been noted. For example, The Metamorphosis, telling the brutal and sudden transformation of the man called Gregor Samsa into an insect. The Castle, which describes a search for one's own identity by way of getting to know the other. The Trial, which sees an accused man become an outlaw of society. Now this was one of Joseph Losey's last directorial outings in his distinguished career. He was an American theatre and film director, producer and screenwriter. Born in Wisconsin, he studied in Germany with Bertolt Brecht and then returned to the US. Blacklisted by Hollywood in the 1950s, he moved back into Europe, where he made the remainder of his films, mostly in the UK. Among the most critically and commercially successful, of course, were the screenplays written by Harold Pinter. The Servant from 1963 with Dirk Bogarde and James Fox, and The Go-Between. I also have to particularly mention The Accident, also starring Dirk Bogarde. Losey made some formidable British films in the 1960s, advancing the career, incidentally, of Dirk Bogarde in a new and exciting direction, which of course brought him to the attention of Visconti, with roles he was given in The Damned and Death in Venice, both titles of course in the Criterion collection. Recently his film The Servant received a nice box set release in 4K HD, incidentally again from Studio Canal, and I'm frankly surprised that Criterion haven't picked this one up for a later 4K release in their collection in the US, or perhaps they have. Losey's last completed film was released in 1985, and that was called Steaming, and he passed away sadly a year before that film was released. Alain Delon in this film gives another mesmerising performance as Robert Klein, with standout supporting players such as Jean Moreau as Florence, Michael Lonsdale as Pierre, Francine Berger as Nicole, Juliette Berthaud as Janine, Massimo Girotti as Charles, and Magali Clément as Lola. Now the film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 1976, and Best Director for Joseph Losey, as well as Best Production Design for Alexandre Troner. Now there's some special features on the disc, and they are interviews with critic Michel Pimot and editor Henri Lano, interviews from 1976 with director Joseph Losey and actor Alain Delon, Story of a Day, a 1986 documentary on the real-life Veldiv roundup, and a central historical element, of course, of Mr Klein. A trailer and a written essay by the film scholar Jeanette Vendonceau. The cover art for the disc is by Gary Kelly, and the film itself has a running time of 123 minutes. Mr Klein comes to the collection as a new spine number 1123, and it's out on Tuesday, April the 10th in the US on Blu-ray. Now on to Bertrand Tavernier's Round Midnight, starring Dexter Gordon. Now I covered this release in last month's Let's Talk Criterion, and a link to that is now above, if you want to look at that release. It releases in the UK Monday the 9th of May, priced $17.99. A lot of people say that the UK releases often are delayed and available earlier as US releases, and of course, sometimes the choice appears sporadic. Now, my advice to you, if you can afford it, is to get the US version, as you usually get a jump by at least a month or more on the UK release. Amazon US has regular sales, and they often discount the import tax from the price of the disc, so it works out around the £25 mark. But as always, it's about your budget, and usually for me, my patience. It's also disappointing at the moment that the UK collection aren't getting any of the 4K UHD releases the US are. Hopefully that will change in time. Now, our next release is by Japanese director Yuzo Itami, and many will know and love his other great title, of course, in the collection, and that is Tampopo. Now, when I watched that, I had a whole new appreciation for ramen noodles. His tongue-in-cheek style amuses and surprises, and The Funeral is no exception, of course. The Funeral is his first full-length feature, and in it we see the unique visual and storytelling style of this director beginning to emerge. In the wake of her father's sudden passing, a successful actor, Itami's wife and frequent collaborator, Nobuko Miyamoto, and her lascivious husband, Tsutomu Yamazaki, leave Tokyo and return to her family home to oversee a traditional funeral. Over the course of 3 days of mourning that bring illicit escapades into the woods, a surprisingly materialistic priest, Shishu Ryu, and cinema's most epic sandwich handoff, the tensions between public propriety and private hypocrisy are laid bare. Deftly weaving dark comedy with poignant family drama, The Funeral is a fearless satire of the clash between old and new in Japanese society, in which nothing, not even the finality of death, is off limits. Now, Itami was born Yoshihiro Yuchiki in Kyoto, and the name Itami was passed on from his father Mansaku Itami, who was a renowned satirist and film director before World War II. After failing the entrance exam for the College of Engineering at Osaka University, Itami worked at times as a commercial designer, a television reporter, a magazine editor, and an essayist. He went into directing for Japanese TV in the 1970s, and it was a natural progression to cinema, where he found his unique style. The Funeral proved popular in Japan and won many awards, including Japanese Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. However, it was his second movie, that's the noodle western Tampopo, that earned him international exposure and acclaim. He also spent a spell in hospital some years after he made The Funeral, where he got to observe, and that inspired his next film, Daibyonin, a grim satire on the Japanese health system of the time. Now, The Funeral is a clever and cheeky comedy, which is very assured as the first feature by any director. The supplements on this release are new interviews with actors Nobuko Miyamoto and Manpai Ikuchi, creative marriages Yuzo Itami and Nobuko Miyamoto, a short program produced by the Criterion channel, commercials for Ichikuroku Tart and director Yuzo Itami, plus an essay by author Piko Ayer, and for the Blu-ray, excerpts from Itami's 1985 book Diary of the Funeral, and from the 2007 Remembrance of Itami by actor Tsutomu Yamazaki. And of course I love the cover art by Yatsuro Kyuchi. And the film's a running time of 124 minutes. The Funeral releases in the US on Blu-ray, Spine 1125, on Tuesday 17th of May. It releases in the UK Monday the 9th of May, that's a week earlier. And if you want to take a look at Itami's other film in the collection, that's Tampopo, at Spine 868. Now on to the famed Indian woman, Myra Nair. Now last year, BFI released her 1988 seminal film about street children in now modern day Mumbai, that's Salam Bombay. And now we have Criterion's release of Mississippi Masala. Now I just recently watched the delightful Sarita Chowdhury looking through the Criterion closet, and of course she plays Meena in the film. Now the other sizzling co-star is the one and only Denzel Washington, in what was a very early role in his film career as the charming carpet cleaner Demetrius. Between them both, they create a unique screen chemistry. Now Myra Nair is a filmmaker based in New York City. Now she has her own production company called Mirabai Films, and they specialise in films for international audiences on Indian society, whether in the economic, social or cultural spheres. Her work, Monsoon Wedding, also has a place in the Criterion collection, and it's her other films, Salam Bombay, Mississippi Masala, Kama Sutra, A Tale of Love, which have earned her nominations and awards all over the world. Now, Mississippi Masala is a 1991 romantic drama directed by May Criterion, based upon a screenplay by Soni Taraporivala, starring Denzel Washington, Sarita Choudhury, and Roshan Seth. Set primarily in rural Mississippi, the film explores interracial romance between African Americans and Indian Americans in the US. Years after her Indian family was forced to flee their home in Uganda by the dictatorship of Idi Amin, 20-something Meena, played by Sarita Choudhury, spends her days cleaning rooms in an Indian-run motel in Mississippi. When she falls for the charming black carpet cleaner Demetrius, played by Denzel Washington, their passionate romance challenges the prejudices of both of their families and exposes the rifts between the region's Indian and African American communities. It tackles thorny issues of racism, colorism, culture clash and displacement with big-hearted humour and keen insight. Nair serves up a sweet, sexy and deeply satisfying celebration of love's power. The script for the film was written in Brooklyn, New York, after research by Nair, Taraporivala and their team in Mississippi and Kampala. While doing research in Mississippi, Nair met a carpet cleaner called Demetrius and decided to model the main character after him. Ben Kingsley was originally cast in the role of Meena's father, but he eventually withdrew from the project, prompting the original backers of the film to pull out as well. Nair was able to gain new funding after Denzel Washington was chosen for the role of Demetrius, and she later mentioned she faced substantial pressures from potential backers to cast white leads rather than Indians or African Americans. The Mississippi-based scenes in the film were filmed in Mississippi in the towns of Greenwood, Grenada and Biloxi and Ocean Springs, and the Uganda scenes were filmed in Kampala, including Nair's home. Now, this film comes as a welcome addition to the collection, and it contains the following special features. There's a 4K digital restoration of the film, supervised by director May Criterion and director of photography Ed Lachman, a new audio commentary featuring Nair herself. New conversation between the actor Sarita Choudhury and the film critic Devika Girish. New interviews with Lachman, screenwriter Soni Taraporivala, and production designer and photographer Mitch Epstein. And a written essay by the critic Bilal Qureshi, and for the Blu-ray, we've excerpts from Nair's production journal for the film. New cover art is by Fixed Design, and I must say that the recently announced cover art through the last few months by Criterion has been very colourful, and I admire the artistry in the designs coming from these creatives. For me, 1988's Salam Bombay still remains her bravest film to date, and the first, of course, full-length cinema feature she produced, and it's certainly because its subject is more powerful than this romance story, and it looks at the grittier edge of existence in urban India. This film has a running time of 117 minutes. Mississippi Masala releases for the first time on Blu-ray in the US Criterion collection as Spine 1127, and it's available only from Tuesday the 24th of May. A mystery man, a murder and a wad of missing cash. In his wryly offbeat breakthrough, Wayne Wang updates the ingredients of classic film noir for the streets of contemporary San Francisco's Chinatown. When their business partner disappears with the money they'd planned to use for a cab licence, driver Joe, played by Wood Moy, and his nephew Steve, played by Mark Hayashi, scour the city's back alleys, waterfronts and Chinese restaurants to track him down. But what begins as a search for a missing man gradually turns into a far deeper and more elusive investigation into the complexities and contradictions of Chinese American identity. This is the first feature by an Asian American filmmaker to play widely and get mainstream critical appreciation. Chan is Missing is a continuously fresh and surprising landmark of indie invention that playfully flips decades of cinematic stereotypes on their head. Wang was born and raised in Hong Kong and named after his father's favourite movie star of the time, John Wayne. When he was 17, his parents arranged for him to move to the US to study and to prepare for medical school. Wang, however, soon put this plan aside when his eyes were completely opened by a new experience, and he turned to the arts, studying film and television at California's College of Arts in Oakland. Now, Wang's debut feature in 1975 came with A Man, a Woman and a Killer. And his second feature was Chan is Missing, and as such, that launched his career. Dim Sum, A Little Bit of Heart from 1985 and Eat a Bowl of Tea from 1989 firmly established his reputation. And he's best known for The Joy Luck Club 1993, Made in Manhattan 2002 and the independent features Smoke 1995 and Anywhere But Here 1999. At the 2007 Toronto International Film Festival, Wang premiered two feature films, 1,000 Years of Good Prayers and The Princess of Nebraska, as well as appearing in the Arthur Dong documentary film Hollywood Chinese. He won the Golden Shell at the San Sebastian Film Festival in September 2007 for 1,000 Years of Good Prayers. And in 2016, he won a Lifetime Achievement Award at the San Diego Asian Film Festival. Now, the film Chan is Missing has a fairly short running time of 75 minutes. And it's another new title to the US collection, Aspine 1124, and it releases in the US only on Tuesday, 24th of May. Finally, we have what many will consider to be the definitive noir film directed by Billy Wilder and starring Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray. It's Double Indemnity. Now, has dialogue ever been more perfectly hard-boiled? Has a femme fatale ever been as deliciously wicked as that of Barbara Stanwyck? And has 1940s Los Angeles ever looked so seductively sordid? Working with co-writer Raymond Chandler, director Billy Wilder launched himself onto Hollywood A-list with this epitome of film noir fatalism from James M. Cain's pulp novel. When the slick salesman Walter Neff, played by Fred MacMurray, walks into the swank home of dissatisfied housewife Phyllis Dietrichson, played by Barbara Stanwyck, he intends to sell insurance to her, but he winds up becoming entangled with her in a far more sinister way. Featuring scene-stealing supporting work from Edward G. Robinson and the excellent cinematography by John F. Zeitz, Double Indemnity is one of the most entertainingly perverse stories ever set to film, and the standard by which all noir must be judged. It's been on the cards to be released by Criterion, albeit in HD format on Blu-ray for some years now, but the fact that they've now restored it in 4K UHD, and of course with Dolby Vision HDR grading on top, is stupendous. Many Criterion fans will be literally salivating at the thought of getting this little beauty into their player. I personally can't wait, and I purposely avoided getting any other available Blu-ray releases of this film in the hope that this one would get the Criterion Collection treatment, and indeed it did. And it couldn't be a better time, what with Kino Lorber's foray into 4K, and they're leading the field with releasing the restored Apartment on 4K by Billy Wilder, also on UHD. The time is ripe to mow the rich filmography of Wilder for its great treasures. With a screenplay by Billy Wilder and the great Raymond Chandler, who gave us The Big Sleep, we see the quintessential film noir offering. The screenplay was based on James M. Cain's 1943 novel of the same name, which appeared as an 8-part serialisation in the Liberty magazine in February 1936. Now, James M. Cain based his novella on a 1927 murder, which was perpetrated by a married Queens, New York woman and her lover, whose trial he attended while working as a journalist in New York. Now, in that crime, Ruth Schneider persuaded her boyfriend, Judd Gray, to kill her husband, Albert, after having him take out a big insurance policy with a double indemnity clause. Now, the murderers were quickly identified, arrested and, of course, convicted. And of course, the front page photo of Snyder's execution in the electric chair at Sing Sing, captured by reporter Tom Hard using a hidden camera attached to his right ankle, has been called the most famous news photo of the 1920s. Double Indemnity began making the rounds in Hollywood shortly after it was published in Liberty magazine. Cain had made a name for himself the year before with The Postman Always Rings Twice, another story of murder and passion between a migrant worker and the unhappy wife of a cafe owner. Cain's agent sent copies of the novella to all the major studios, and within days, MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, 20th Century Fox and Columbia were all competing to buy the rights for $25,000. And then a letter went out from Joseph Breen at the Hayes office, and the studios withdrew their bids immediately. Now, Criterion bring the superb film into 4K UHD Blu-ray with HDR Dolby Vision. The supplements are contained on the second disc in the set, and they are an audio commentary featuring film critic Richard Schleichel, a new interview with film scholar Noah Eisenberg, editor of Billy Wilder on Assignment, new conversation between film historians Eddie Muller and Imogen Sarah Smith, Billy, How Did You Do It?, a 1992 film by Volker Schlondorf and Gisela Grijau, featuring interviews with the director Billy Wilder, Shadows of Suspense, a 2006 documentary on the making of Double Indemnity, radio adaptations from 1945 and 1950, a trailer for the film, and a written essay by critic Angelica Jade Bastien. And the new cover art is by Greg Ruth. Raymond Chandler actually was given a cameo as a man reading a magazine outside Key's office in the film. Now, the film is from 1944 and it has a running time of 108 minutes. Double Indemnity releases on 4K UHD in the US on Tuesday the 31st of May and in the UK on Blu-ray only on Monday the 30th of May. Exactly the same release week for both. And on that preview, we come to the end of this month's Let's Talk Criterion. In June, we'll be back with the UK with Richard Roundtree in Shaft and the 4K version releasing in the US. Black Girl from the father of African cinema Ousmane Sembène in the UK, and also in the UK another Jim Jarmusch title, Dead Man, featuring Johnny Depp. In the US, Tales of Hoffman from Paul and Pressburger, Farewell Amour from Ekwa Mazangi, Rouge from Stanley Kwan, and The Worst Person in the World from Joachim Trier, and finally, in the US, John Waters' 70s favourite Pink Flamingos making its long-awaited debut in the collection, aged 50. So until then, from me, it's goodbye, and above all, good viewing.